Good evening, and welcome again to Public Perspective. I'm your host, Kevin McDermott, and tonight we'll be talking about your health, or our health. Our guest tonight is Dr. Lorene Wu, founder and director of the Whole Life Center. So, Dr. Wu, thank you so much for being here. It's a pleasure to have you back.
Thank you for inviting me.
So tonight we're going to talk about how people can actually stay healthy and be healthy without necessarily loading up with a bunch of medicines, right?
Correct.
Let's talk a little bit about your background, just first of all, so people know why you bring such expertise to this. You are an MD, and you also practice traditional Chinese medicine, right?
Correct.
So you've been able to think about both the Western perspective and the Eastern perspective as you bring this to your patients, right?
Correct. And I've actually added another expertise, a third expertise, which is functional medicine. And with Chinese medicine, it's a very complete system. So it has 7 schools, one of which is acupuncture and Chinese herbology, a very complex pharmacology, herbal pharmacology. And there's also Tuina, a form of massage. And so this is one large part of my practice. However, in doing that, about 10 years, I've been practicing over 20 years now. In doing that at first, it was great results. However, I started noticing that patients weren't always getting the results that I thought they needed to, and what I realized is they weren't necessarily digesting a lot of the herbs I was giving them, or they were so either deficient, like worn down, or very excess, stressed, etc., that somehow the acupuncture and herbs wasn't always getting the desired effects. So I needed to add a third discipline, which is functional medicine. So
and what exactly is that? What's functioning or not functioning in functional medicine?
Functional medicine is a form of medicine where you are looking at functional systems. So you might be looking at a gastrointestinal system or someone's immune system. And there's testing, and we test for things that aren't always routinely tested in Western medicine, but gives us a lot of information. And the treatment is often herbal or supplements. So this is the realm in which a lot of vitamins and minerals are given, cofactors. Fascinating area is the area of nutrigenomics, which is how to use nutrition to change your genetic makeup. Not change your genetic makeup, but change your genetic expression.
And by genetic expression for our lay audience,
Sure.
including me, as I understand it, your genes express themselves by creating proteins, and so an expression means it's created a protein that may do something good or may do something bad. So if we're talking about nutrigenomics, then I would assume you're talking about controlling genes that may be switched off, may not be expressing themselves at all, but could get switched on under some circumstances. Is that fair to say?
Correct. Excellent.
Do I get points for knowing that?
I'm very impressed, Kevin.
Okay.
So, what it is absolutely you inherit genes that express certain proteins, and if you have what we call a genetic variation, that instead of having the base pair that expresses, in a way, the correct gene, you express a variant, then your pathway, your biochemical pathway, may not be going like this, it goes this way. One of the most famous...
When it should be coming straight down, but it's going off on a tangent.
Exactly. Okay. And one of the most famous genetic variations that's studied quite a bit and talked about quite a bit nowadays is MTHFR, which stands for methyl-tetrahydrofolate reductase. And what this is
you can't say that fast 5 times, I'm sure.
You want to try?
No.
But anyway, what it does is it allows for, in a way, the detoxification in the liver. It's a methylation process. But if people don't have this variant, they end up building a lot of toxins in their liver. In addition, they won't necessarily express the DNA correctly because you need methylation to do DNA replication. So there's a lot of implications. But the beauty of nutrigenomics is the way to turn off this variation or to bypass this variation is to give someone a B vitamin, a variant of a B vitamin called methylfolate. So instead of regular folate, you give them methylfolate. So by giving people these methyl groups, you are giving them what this genetic variation isn't giving them, and then they now go down the correct pathway.
Now, how is that really different from giving medicine? I mean, it's a vitamin, which is, I guess, a naturally occurring substance. But in traditional medicine, or Western medicine, you would give a drug that might do the same thing. So what's the advantage or disadvantage of what you're talking about?
Well, namely side effects, because this is something that should have naturally been occurring in your body. We're just giving something to you that in which you're deficient in, or you don't have enough of, or for some reason your pathway is not going the correct way, and we're just helping you go down a correct pathway. Not only are the side effects minimal to none, the benefits are wide-ranging. So by correcting something so fundamental, you not only are, for example, in terms of expression, this genetic variation has a lot to do with cardiovascular health. It has a lot to do with mood disturbance. It's used quite a bit in psychiatry, you know.
So if you control this, you might control mood swings?
Depression, severe depression. You can control multiple, recurrent miscarriages. So you see the wide range of medical conditions just correcting this one variation can have. And then with it being as simple as a vitamin, you don't have the side effects of medication. So the name of this whole area is precision medicine. I mean, and Obama has just, given a speech about how they're allocating hundreds of millions of dollars into research in this area. And I think it's really exciting, for example, in cancer research. They're now doing genetic studies of cancers, and cancers can mutate and take on different characteristics.
Even while they're being treated. Right?
Exactly, because they're mutating as they're giving them chemo. And so by doing genetic studies of the cancer and knowing the different medications they can give to block some of the gene expressions, you can get ahead of some of these cancers that before were quite lethal.
There was just an article in the New York Times, I believe, about a young man, I forget what city he was in, a young athlete, a surfer, who had this same problem. His cancer was mutating very rapidly, and he was at, what's the place up in Minneapolis?
Mayo Clinic in
Clinic,
Rochester,
yes.
Minneapolis.
Yeah. And this is how they stayed ahead of it, through testing the genome of his cancer.
Right.
And finding that the cancer was mutating in ways that they could now see and handle.
Right.
Rather than having to wait to see, oh, gee, this chemo stopped working and now we don't know what to do, let's throw something else at it.
Right.
They knew which direction to follow, and the guy is actually now in remission.
Yes, exactly. And so that's very exciting in terms of diseases, but in terms of preventing the expression of the disease, that's where the real power of preventive medicine comes in. So for example, if we were able to sequence someone's genome and say, okay, you have the variation that predisposes you to Parkinson's or Alzheimer. I mean, they actually know which one's the Alzheimer. And so therefore, if you know that, then can you take certain nutritional supplements and vitamins or minerals, or find out what it is that blocks that expression? And so this is where a lot of the research, and I would say in the next 10, 20 years, we should really be looking for a lot more research and a lot more guidance as to what to take in order to prevent the expression of certain diseases. And a lot of research is being done in Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, Alzheimer, et cetera. Mm-hmm.
Now, I should point out, you have a number of patients. You treat a lot of cancer patients, but you don't treat the cancer directly because they're going through, and you don't in any way represent that what you do is the equivalent of chemotherapy or radiation or surgery or any other traditional cancer remedies. So I think that's very interesting. I'd like to have you talk a little bit about the fact that particularly what you do there, really it's an adjunct to, not necessarily a replacement for, because I think a lot of people get scared. They're like, well, what, I'm going to give up my doctor and go just, live off fruits and berries? And it sounds weird, but that's not at all what you're involved in, correct?
Correct. I mean, back up a little bit, this whole area is now called integrative medicine. So it's about integrating the best of conventional medicine and what we call alternative medicine, which encompasses not only Chinese medicine, but back to the subject of functional medicine, which was studying, but giving very precise herbal selection, supplement, vitamin, mineral selections. So now it's called integrative because it's the best of all worlds. And so, yes, I mean, there are a very few select patients who come to me knowing they want no chemo, no surgery, no radiation. And I'm supportive of them because I'm supportive of patients wherever they may be. However, generally speaking, I do find using the best of both worlds the best solution, because many cancers now in Western medicine They can actually, using surgery, chemo, radiation, put it into remission. Preventing recurrence is the bigger problem. And the idea is if we don't change the soil in which this cancer has grown, if we don't change the matrix of the person's being, that cancer will come back. So this is where the power of Chinese medicine comes in. Chinese medicine believes cancer is primarily caused by 4 things: too much mucus in the body, too much heat in the body, stagnation, that is poor circulation, and toxicity. And so we look at the person, where were they so out of balance that cancer occurred? Because at any given time, we all have cancer cells, but we have strong enough immune systems that put the cancer into remission or maintain balance in the body. But what happened to that person? You'll often find, in talking to a cancer patient, I'll ask, what happened the year or 2 before your diagnosis? And you'll often find they had a major stress, a major loss, some kind of emotional upset, or several years of a lot of stress at work, that sort of thing. There was something that pushed someone over the edge in terms of the decline in their immune system. So we find where was the deficiency? Chinese medicine, deficient qi, blood, yin. But then I bring functional medicine into it. Was their gut? I mean, because 75% of your immune cells are in your gut. So did somehow their digestive system go off? Somehow did their sleep system go off? Somehow do they have chronic respiratory problems? Do they have chronic dental problems? Something, or chronic urinary tract infections, something that constantly was wearing down their immune system, so they were no longer able to fight any cancers in the body.
So the idea, if I understand correctly, is to, I like the idea of imbalance. Something is out of balance in your life, in your body, or in your life and therefore your body, or vice versa. And the idea is to find where is that imbalance. Is there too much stress in your life? Are you eating really terrible things? Have you injured yourself in some way that you haven't treated properly? That sort of thing, and then try to regain that balance in order, as you say, to change the soil in which any disease, cancer or anything else, can grow. Is that the basic idea?
Exactly. That's really simplified because I don't want to ever give the impression that stress alone causes cancer. Of course, cancer is multifactorial. It's never one thing. But yes, definitely trying to go back in time and figure out where was the imbalance, where did it begin, and trying to correct for some of that. But I have patients who say, I've been great. I slept great, my digestion was great, my mood was great. I have no idea why I got cancer. Then I start looking at the genetics. I start looking at, okay, was there a genetic predisposition? And you'll find, some families, there's cancer all over the family. And so that's where that precision medicine comes in. And sometimes I refer patients to get their genetics, their whole genetic genome worked out by a company called 23andMe. And it's somewhat controversial. The FDA did shut them down, but part of it was they didn't want the genetic information in the hands of consumers because they felt that it would be
it's too easy to misinterpret.
Exactly, misinterpret or be upsetting and whatnot. So now how they've worked it out is, one, now 23andMe has to charge for it, and 2, the data is sent to other companies who then send the reports to patients. But it's still, I find, a very reasonable, in terms of expense, way to get your genetics.
Because a predisposition doesn't mean that this will occur in your life. It just
Not
means that
at all.
you may be at higher risk, and so once again, there are lifestyle choices you can make that will help minimize what that is. And again, I stress, all this, I have a minimal background in statistics, but I love the idea that everything really is a matter of probabilities, and you want to minimize the probabilities. Doesn't mean it's going to go away, but you lessen the risk.
Exactly.
Right? Now, before the show, we were talking a lot about autoimmune disease, and I want to make sure we get to that, because how the show goes, time can slip away before we even know it.
Yeah.
So let's segue into autoimmune, which is related, and particularly I said when you were talking about your digestion.
Right.
So what's happening in that field now?
Well, as we were talking, many physicians, many, conferences I go to, doctors are all talking about the dramatic rise in autoimmune diseases we're seeing.
And what is an autoimmune disease?
An autoimmune disease is a disease in which your body begins attacking itself. So some names that might be familiar to people is like Hashimoto's, thyroiditis, low thyroid function. It can begin as high thyroid function, but it eventually is low thyroid function, which an antibody that you make yourself attacks and damages your thyroid so it no longer functions. Crohn's can be an autoimmune, where your body's attacking your digestive system, an ulcerative colitis. Some forms of diabetes, especially type 1, where your body is attacking your own islet cells and you're not making insulin anymore. I could go on and on. There's different joint diseases, variations of rheumatoid arthritis. And
now, are these not just diseases of old age, or what's the underlying cause here with these autoimmune diseases, or this explosion of autoimmune diseases?
Well, what's happening, that's the question, is why are people attacking themselves? And one theory, which has a lot of credence because we can intervene with it clinically, is that our diets are causing this leaky gut. And what happens is, normally you're supposed to eat and you extract the nutrients, the waste goes away. But if the food is somehow irritating, an allergic food, or a genetically modified food that perhaps the body can't process, doesn't recognize, then what happens, it causes irritation of the gut lining, and then these macromolecules leak out, if you will. The intestinal cells have tight junctions between them. They should have tight junctions. But when you have these irritating types of foods, they can break the junction, break that zonulin, and then the particles go into that wide complex matrix of vessels, blood vessels, in which a lot of immune cells are waiting, B cells, T cells, cells that are going to make antibodies, other Th1, Th2, cells that can do a lot of destruction in the body in terms of inflammation.
So they create these antibodies, so the food particles may leak through and essentially contaminate the bloodstream.
Yes.
And then the body creates antibodies for the particles, but these antibodies also have the negative. They may attack the particle, but they also attack other parts of your body.
Exactly, right? Exactly. And so if you look at the list of antibodies, autoantibodies, where we're making antibodies to ourselves, it's shocking, the list. I mean, we go all the way, there are several that involve cerebral circulation. And this is a huge topic because the explosion of patients we're seeing now with anxiety, depression, headaches, brain fog, memory loss, a lot of it is those zonulin that cause...
What is zonulin?
Zonulin is the tight junctions.
Oh, it sounds like something out of Star Trek. It's some star system. We're going to the zonulin 4. Sorry, go on.
Lots of the body really plays like Star Trek. Anyway, the zonulin can break. Well, we have the same zonulin between the cells in the blood-brain barrier. So as this is leaking out, breaking through the zonulin, you're breaking through the zonulin, the blood-brain barrier, and people are actually having a lot of brain inflammation.
How does that manifest? What does that look like if you have brain inflammation? What are the symptoms? What do you see?
Well, a lot of times they can be kind of subtle and vague, such as headaches, anxiety, depression, brain fog, memory loss. Okay. But there's one specific called cerebellar ataxia. Okay, so cerebellar is the area of your brain that controls balance. Ataxia is like you're off in your balance in walking. And what happens is gluten, the molecular structure of gluten looks almost exactly like the molecular structure of the cerebellum. And so it's called molecular mimicry. So you eat this, if it leaks out, your body's creating antibodies to that. But then it sees the cerebellum and then it attacks
thinks it's the same thing.
Exactly. And so then you get the cerebellar ataxia. And so I've had patients where if you take away gluten from their diet, their mood, their depression, and cerebellar ataxia, I mean, like they were off balance, they were getting vertigo, they were having headaches, brain fog, a lot of it goes away. So that's one huge area where antibodies are going. Thyroid, we talked about. The heart, you can have definitely myocardial antibodies, definitely intestinal, there's quite a few there. ovaries, testes. So anytime I have patients, we're dealing with infertility, we're definitely looking at food allergies there also. Muscles, joint, liver. I mean, the list goes on and on where these antibodies go to.
So this is, I mean, this is fascinating, and a lot of this, as I'm guessing, is controllable by diet, like removing gluten. Why is this not more widely recognized? Why is this like a specialty? Because there's something very basic about, you are what you eat. I mean, who hasn't heard that expression?
Right.
So why isn't this more widely recognized in medicine as a whole, that this, whatever we bring into our body is contributing to things that may be going wrong?
It's a great question. I think it's becoming more widely recognized. The reason I know is because a lot of my patients come to me from other specialists, and many specialists are telling them to stay off of gluten, stay off of dairy. So it's beginning to trickle into Western medicine because they're seeing the results, which it can be dramatic. But I think one of the primary reasons is food is such an emotional topic for a lot of people. A lot of people want a pill. To have someone change their diet over and over, I've heard people say, I can't. It's too difficult. I'm too busy. I have kids. For a variety of reasons. And I totally understand that, and yet it needs to be done. As an example, I just had a group of patients. We went through a 6-week detox. And as part of that,
no, that's not alcoholic detox.
No,
that's
no,
a different form.
A food detox, cleansing the body detox. And as part of that, I did a lecture every week in an effort to address that emotional component, but also a very practical component of how do you live life, taking out gluten, taking out dairy. And we did it very strictly. We did something called autoimmune paleo, where we also took out grains, beans, legumes, nuts and seeds, nightshades. I mean, it was very difficult, and yet the people in the group had dramatic results. But we did emotional techniques. I had a great speaker come in who did emotional freedom technique, which is a method of tapping to break some of the emotional attachments people have to food. So in the middle of a craving, I had people learn techniques so that they could block some of that intense craving they may have. We did cognitive behavioral therapy to help people, some of the thoughts people have. I had a hard day, therefore I should eat this. So again, food's very emotional, so it's
Comfort
tough.
foods, right?
Pardon?
Comfort foods.
Comfort foods, and really, quite frankly, they work. Okay, so food triggers, for example, sugar raises endorphins, fat raises endorphins. So if you're exhausted, tired, you want to feel good, as a drug, nothing beats sugar. I always say the number 1 and 2 drugs in America are caffeine and sugar. I mean,
most people say that they're staples of their diet.
Exactly. But why? Because caffeine's a methylxanthine. It makes your pupils dilate. You're alert. Basically, you're running from a tiger because it's creating that same fight or flight. But we get addicted to that high, that alertness. But people don't understand the crash on the other side. And for many people, if you actually give up coffee, you have more energy in the long run because you're not on that up and down emotional roller coaster. And sugar, people don't realize, a lot of my patients with a lot of anxiety and depression, when you take them off sugar and try to help them eat a higher protein, which can still be plant-based, it doesn't have to be meat, but a higher protein than carb diet, they don't realize how steady their mood can be, that a lot of the mood fluctuation is basically sugar fluctuation.
High, sugar crash.
Exactly.
I was just quickly say that I had to give up drinking coffee some years ago because I was getting reflux disease, and I found that mood, that issue you're talking about, where I would have a couple cups of coffee in the morning, and by 11 o'clock I would be just dragging.
Yes.
And when I gave it up, it was a much more even kind of day.
Yes.
So I have personal experience to say that yes, this is true.
Right, and so a lot of people, I think it's a great question about why is it so difficult to talk about food. And I am well aware, and I feel for patients when I say to them, look, if you gave up coffee, alcohol, or gluten or dairy or whatever it is, it would be better. So I say to people, don't listen to me. Test it for yourself. Don't eat or drink it for 1 week, ideally 2 weeks. 100%, nothing for 2 weeks, And at the end of 2 weeks, eat or drink as much as you want in one day of that substance. And prove to yourself. See, people don't realize how bad it is, what it's doing to them, until they're off of it long enough, and then they have it, and then most
They can
people
really feel it.
Oh, most people are shocked. Symptoms like dairy can cause a lot of congestion. Gluten can cause a lot of pain. People don't realize a lot of their aches and pains and joint pain, arthritis, all of that is actually inflammation from the food they eat. And I'm not saying it's only that, but cutting down, changing your diet can dramatically cut down the pain in your body.
Now, one of the things I've noticed, and I say this to friends of mine who have the similar reaction, oh, I could never give that up. You know, I have, it's in my case, coffee, and I don't miss it. And at first it's very difficult because you're so used to it. But after a while, it just becomes a habit. It's normal.
Yes.
And you just change the baseline, essentially. So even giving up something that seems really important, like, God, I could never give up pizza. Well, you give it up, and after a while, you know, it no longer appeals to you. I've found that you're not interested in it anymore.
Yes, yes. Excellent. That's exactly what happens. And for some people, it's a process. Like maybe they only eat it once a week, and then they start eating it every 2 weeks, or then they start eating gluten-free but with the regular cheese. Then they start eating gluten-free with dairy-free cheese, and then eventually they don't eat it at all. So for some people, it is a gradual desensitization process. For other people, it's dramatic. They dramatically feel so much better. They're like, that stops them. Every time they want to eat it, they go, oh, I do not want to feel that same way again.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, for a lot of people, they don't have that dramatic a result, but they don't realize cumulatively what it's doing to them. So therefore, for a lot of people, I do suggest, you know, this experiment so that they experientially can feel for themselves what it does to them. But yes, I have many people who say, I could never live without that. And eventually they do, and they're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I ever ate that. So people do get there.
Yeah.
They do get there.
And it brings us back to something we talked briefly about before the show about the concept of subtractive medicine.
Right.
Like pulling away, instead of adding more things in, more pills, more drugs, start pulling things out that may be causing these kinds of imbalances, and that pulling things out can be frequently much more effective than adding another thing in, because if you pull something out, you're not adding side effects.
Right, right, and a lot of times, for example, a classic example will be dairy. A lot of people with chronic sinus problems, chronic cough, you know, asthma, eczema, a lot of that is dairy related. And yes, I have many herbs I can give you to correct every one of these medical conditions, but I say to people, why don't you give up dairy first before I add a pill? And some people say, no, it's too hard, just give me the pills. And so I do. Some people say, well, let me try. And then, so sometimes it's a combination. But yes, it would be ideal to give up the food, because then you're not relying on pills or anything else. I do give people a lot of vitamins, and in a perfect world, I wouldn't if their diets were complete enough that they could. However, some of the issues is our soil is depleted. And so a lot of times, I mean, even the organic is better. They're rotating their soil every 3 years. They have a lot of strict requirements. But even then, they're not necessarily putting into the soil all the minerals that we need to put in. So we do have to use a lot of vitamins sometimes.
So believe it or not, we're out of time.
Oh, already?
Already.
Okay.
So that just means you're going to have to come back.
Okay,
So.
very good. Okay, thank you.
Dr. Wu, so thank you so much for being here. It's always a pleasure to have you on and talk to you.
Thanks.
And thank you for joining us once again on Public Perspective. I'm your host, Kevin McDermott. You can find us every Saturday night at 8 on Comcast Channel 19, and you can see us on the web at publicperspective.tv. So till next time, thank you and good night.